The only war Donald Trump is launching during his presidency is the global trade war. He began the process of restoring American sovereignty with his aggressive tariffs. We all know that. But what else does he need to do? Well, Chris Bedford wrote about this in his Beltway brief. So he is the perfect person to break this down for us. So we know, Chris, that Donald Trump, he wants to be in a position of power, the art of the deal. So how can Donald Trump go through and actually wage a stronger trade war right now?
Well, that's the pull and tug right here with the president. Is he is someone who likes to get the best deal possible for the United States. The concern is that my concern is that he's willing to strike a deal with China at all, essentially. Now, China is a major problem, and I'm not one of those just random saber rattlers who likes to go out there and talk about how we need to commit American naval men to fight and die for Taiwan. But China has ripped off our economy, and with the help of a lot of America's ruling elites and our financial markets, has essentially helped gut the United States over the last 30 years, 40 years, or 30 years, our economy. I mean, the United States doesn't have a huge amount of exports. It's pretty small, but we have one major, massive export, and that's the US dollar. And the scheme that we've come up with over the last couple of decades that has made the Wall Street a lot richer is that we print this paper, we send it abroad, and in response, these foreign countries, these slave states, these third world places with sweatshops send us back cheap stuff. And it seems like a great deal. People get richer, the dollar is the world currency. But the problem is with that stuff comes the dollars come back. Those foreign governments and those foreign people and those foreign entities don't just park it in their bank account. They buy things. And some of that stuff is good to buy, like treasuries. That helps us finance this insane system of outsourcing the United States to foreign countries in exchange for cheap stuff. That keeps the debt workable, essentially. But they also buy real estate, which is why housing prices have gone up so dramatically over the last couple decades. And it's unaffordable for a lot of young Americans, people to buy their first home in the first place. They buy into the stock market, which is why it's completely inflated. That's why Warren Buffett describes the stock market as inflated and not worth the amount of money that's actually in it. Excuse me, it's trying to kick me off of Skype here with the whole new changes. Warren Buffett even says that this is overvalued. It's kind of just gutted the way that the United States is able to do business, the way that the United States is able to operate. And the only way to really change that is to make it so that China can't do business with the United States at the same level that it has. And by doing that, you need tariffs. So if this trade war ends up coming out so that we just get a better deal and better access to Chinese markets, the ability to sell iPhones in China again, which is a big lie that Chinese have always said, hey, come into our country, we'll open up our markets. There's 1 billion people who are consumers. Just kidding, you can't sell here. We're going to pirate your tech. We're going to rip it off. We're going to hold you hostage. We're going to sell it to our people. But by the way, most of our people actually can't afford to buy any products. They're just workers. That's it. That was a big lie. So if they end up trying to just sell more iPhones, open up those markets, or sell more Teslas at better tariff rates to China, that's not actually going to be the win that the United States needs to go forward generationally. I mean, it's a win as far as trade policy goes. The president could rightfully say, this is what I was going for, and this makes a big difference. But if you want to secure the future of the United States as a non-vassal state in 50 years, you need to actually start to change this. You need to reintroduce our industrial abilities within this country. You need to put tariffs on China. And I actually like the way that the trade policy has changed over the last week. The shock and awe of the beginning was a bit much. It brought a lot of people to the table. It's a good thing to actually walk it back, because the United States would suffer a great deal if we decided not to trade with every other country in the world without massive tariffs, where they could still trade with each other. We take an unreasonable amount of pain for that. And it allows us to try and set up what ought to have existed since the last 20, 30 years. Instead, we've had the World Trade Organization. What ought to have existed is that the United States takes its hegemony seriously and allows it to carve up zones of influence and trade influence, where we trade with other countries, starting with Canada, starting with Mexico, then Europe, Australia, the Anglosphere, and other parts of the world, in Asia and all around different markets. But we expect those countries to abide by our trade laws, which will include completely and totally isolating the criminals who run China. And if that's what he's going for, and that's where we start to get to, then this trade war will have made him one of the greatest presidents in American history, someone who will help secure the next century for the United States.
Well, let's hope that's the case. You know, as listening to you talk, I'm thinking I only have one example, just one anecdote of doing this, but it was a real one, negotiating with China, negotiating with people from China over an entertainment deal. And it was like spectacular. Like all the stereotypical things you hear about with anyone who's business all happened in that one deal. So I'll just say Trump has his work cut out for them. This is not going to be easy. But let's talk about the United States for a minute, because you say in this piece, you mentioned a phrase that's music to my ears. I love saying it. I love shocking with people with it. And that is that a lot of the American economy is fake. It's fake.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you think about the reaction you get when you say that to people, it's not pleasant. And when you think about the ruling class that we have now and, you know, a lot of the boomers, great generation, they voted for Trump, but also some of them are very entrenched in their ways about this, the people in charge. How is it possible to move things forward when these people are so entrenched and really don't know what you mean when you say the economy is fake?
I don't. I mean, I've literally fielded complaints from people who I love a great deal in that generation, who are successful, hardworking people you would call middle class, but they have multiple houses. I mean, that is kind of the norm of baby boomers in their 60s who at least achieved the middle class, is that they bought into a market at a time when you could buy a house at an extremely affordable rate. Not the interest rates were higher, but the price of the house was significantly lower than what Americans have to deal with right now. And once you get your first home, you can build off of that. That wealth becomes successful. You can buy your next home. You can try to keep it, take a loan off of it, etc. That first home is really your entryway into the middle class and the upper class, and that's why so many of these boomers are able to accomplish that. And they're going to take a hit. So this is important messaging the president has to get out there, is that the United States will probably take about a 20% hit to the stock market. And the stock market's massively overinflated, maybe 15%. Experts who I spoke to over last week disagree on the level. There will be some inflation. It would be short term, though. I mean, American exports to China are minimal, almost non-existent. And what we actually import from China would lead to more expensive back to school supplies, for example. Those baby outfits you have to buy, I'm currently buying like 3 a week, it seems like, for how fast she's growing, will become more expensive. Americans will have to make sacrifices. That sort of thing would need to be messaged. People say that the economy would probably settle back and get used to this sort of thing within a year. It would be not too dissimilar to the kind of shock therapy that Paul Volcker and Ronald Reagan ran on the economy when they came into a building recession after Jimmy Carter in 1981. And it was a dangerous game of chicken because they were heading straight toward the midterms, which is when Republicans and Democrats alike start to lose their nerve generally. They decided to do it. They went out in his first State of the Union address. Ronald Reagan directly took on what the United States was facing in this and the dangers it was going to pose to the United States and the hardship that was ahead and where we were going with it. And even though the recession was still ongoing, they were able to actually get through it. And he won a landslide re-election a few years later. President Trump has an opportunity, but he can't just be going out with 5 different messengers on 5 different shows, giving different ideas about what they want and what they'd like to say. And then him saying, we're going to do this, we're not going to do this, we're going to do this, and people getting squirmy, this and that. Listen, that may all be true, and I'm sure it is. But he needs to actually get the American people on board for why this is securing the future of the next generation, why this will be essential to their children. And it's a dangerous game because Xi Jinping is a dictator. And this is an existential crisis to him. His people can't buy stuff. He doesn't run an economy that's allowed that. Their giant fake controlled economy, though, does give them jobs, which is essential to civil order and a lack of unrest. Those factories are going dormant. Not all of them, but huge amounts are going dormant right now because there's such a major. They don't consume a lot of the stuff that they make in China. They send it out for other consumers, particularly their biggest customer, the United States. He knows this is an existential threat to his ability, his regime's ability to stay in power. So everyone is moving in the same direction, at least publicly. in China. In the United States, you've got a president who's giving some harsh medicine to the people. The people need to be brought on board. I think they absolutely could be. But the America's ruling elites and the guys in finance definitely won't. They're not interested in taking that hit. They're not interested in that cut. And that's going to be a difficult needle to thread. And it's going to rely on at least some really serious and diligent messaging from this administration.
I love how fired up you get about all of this. And I know that I'll just tell the people, because we were actually texting about this offline over the weekend, just the messaging and making sure that people actually know what to expect. Let's go ahead and put all the trade talk aside. And let's actually end with some highlights, or it's going to be the Lowlights podcast, because the Democrats have a new podcast for men. Let's take a look.
Lovelights is a podcast about failure and how to overcome it. And on this show, you're going to hear us, two former White House speechwriters, talk to some of the best athletes about their worst moments and how they overcame them.
Okay, Chris, just take it away from there. I don't even need to set that up. Just take it from here.
Oh, man, I clicked that link on Friday and I sent it to you guys saying, we got to talk about this when I'm back on Monday because it's just perfect. So these two Kamala Harris staffers, they realize that they are not reaching men. The Democratic Party is not reaching men. So their plan is to start a podcast that highlights great failures by sports legends in American history, which could be like a cool thing. It could be a cool ESPN show to say like the time Babe Ruth completely failed, the time Michael Jordan completely failed, the drama, etc. But this thing's supposed to reach men. They're supposed to be about sports. Their first guest is that perennial loser from Texas who gets his butt kicked every few years in elections. Has nothing to do with sports that I'm aware of. And here's my favorite part. This is the kind of just the perfect mark of Democratic outreach to men. The podcast begins with one of the guys going, "Hey guys," and the other one just chirps in. I got news to you. Almost every man has already tuned you out. The conversation is over. The podcast is going off. If he put it on in the car, he is suddenly embarrassed unless he's driving a Subaru and hopes that no one around him ever heard it. And it got highlighted in Washington, D.C., Democrats, Kamala Harris staffers thinking that this is the way that they're going to reach men just gives me such happy feelings. I had such happy feelings going into the weekend. I feel good inside right now just thinking, wow, they're so lost. They're so lost. Even when they're told they're lost, they don't know how lost they are.
So I didn't even click that link. I was like, oh God, I'm not even gonna look at that. So that's the first time I've seen it, and it is hilarious. Between the voices and then when he gets to, this is gonna be about failure. I'm like, click, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah, see ya. They got the little opening graphics too. I also I guess there's a Boston Red Sox hat in there, and that's cool. I just don't even really trust those guys to talk like that, to talk about sports. I don't know.
I'm just waiting for them to see who paints their fingernails first, which one of the two men there, because that is now one of the big things that men do in sports. And I wish, as a former sports reporter, can we just stop with all of this craziness?
Please stop.
I think we need, remember when NPR, they all tested their testosterone and found out that they're all like dangerously low? I mean, I think maybe we should have a T test before you're allowed to start a podcast for men.
It's brutal. In order for me to listen to my Irish music or my bluegrass radio or any of the old time stuff, I have to put on different NPR affiliates. So I get them every now and then in commercial breaks, just softly lisping across the airwaves about the new threat about public beach access for trans youth of color. So, what are you talking? It's just incredible radio. It's truly an incredible view into a world that is so removed from reality. You can't get enough of it.
Yeah, maybe we can get RFK Jr. out there just trying to figure out where all the men are at.